Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program on regional collaboration and innovation on food production, which will be presented by Dr. Lee Chee, Chairman of the International Association for Agricultural Sustainability. The program will begin with a presentation of the Integrated Mangrove Aquaculture project, which integrates mangrove restoration with aquaculture technology to deliver both climate adaptation and food resilience outcomes. We will then transition into a panel discussion which discusses how regional collaboration can spur agriculture technology adoption and address the impact of climate change on food production. Dr. Lee, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So for those who have been following Singapore pavilions for this particular food program, you realize that in the morning we start with policy. So right now we migrate into the so-called the implementations. And likewise, we talk about the ambitions must translate to actions. So what I'm going to do today is to show you one of the projects that IAAS is helping out to, in a way, is translating it and move into country, and we'll give you a use case that is Brunei, how these projects can be implemented. Yeah, and partly the most important reason is because, you know, in Singapore, we are a small country. As the Minister Fu said that this morning, we don't have much space. So as a result, we're looking for space to grow the produce for Singapore. Now, before I deep dive into this integrated mangrove aquaculture and also the benefits of the mangrove, we all know very well. But the thing is the restoration, conservation costs money. And we know that the mangrove size not just shrinking, but also reduced in number due to the so-called climate change and also the deforestation for aquaculture. And that's how we always have this perception that aquaculture actually contagious to the mangrove restoration or conservation efforts. So I would like to use the next slide is to basically briefly introduce the association, International Association for the Agricultural Sustainability, acronym IAAS. So our whole mission is basically look into at the global levels, how we able to transit to sustainable and resilient food production system. Of course, the focus will be on how we converge all the technologies, climate action, especially for COP30, and also using the natural capital, because that is very important. If you don't rely or use as much natural capital as possible, your cost of production will be very, very high. That's why we believe if you try to create artificial environments for your food productions, it tends to have a higher production cost. Now, the focus area, we basically very focus on the climate positive innovations and how we collaborate with the regions. Yeah, so we go beyond Singapore, and the key is also with translating R&D into impact, and that's important because from our experience, there's no shortage of talents. All these are talents and technologies, but somehow they cannot meet the user or meet the problem statement. So our core value proposition is we would like to turn ambitious climate and sustainability goals into scalable, that's important, bankable, and implementable projects. Yeah. So this is what we have here in IAAS. We have three major clusters. The first cluster is on the academic cluster. That is talents, technology, and know-how. So constantly we are scouting for talents all over the world. And then, of course, the industry cluster is very important. That's where they give us the problem statement. So once you have the problem statement, we will match it and see how the talents or technologies that are available in the world can help them solve the issue that the commercial or the enterprises are facing. Now, of course, very important, that's where all the job creation will be created and also the wealth. Yeah. Now, when we do all this translation, there's always funding needed. There's always some money needed for the early stage of translation. So that's why we have our investor cluster sit next to us, helping us and give us the initial seed or pre-seed to make sure the project can be translated, prove that it works, okay, finish a POC, and then for the POV and subsequent series A, B, and VC proper will come in. So this is what the function and what IAAS has been doing for past almost 10 years. So now let's go to the problem statement. So the problem statement here is we look into the coastal erosion. Yeah, because as I said, the sea level is rising up and the mangrove is actually retreating. In country like Bangladesh, we went there, they needed the help because the seawater actually moved up to the delta and the water no longer fresh, it becomes brackish. So they affect the vegetation, affect the fish as well. So a lot of issues are facing. And for the coastal erosions, of course, we know, yeah, and what and how can they be protected? Of course, the classic is a mangrove. So mangrove is the best and natural capital that one can use to preserve the coastal and provide food security because the mangrove is very biodiverse in terms of the genetic material. A lot of aquatic animals actually live in there. And we shouldn't destroy the mangrove for aquaculture. So most of the aquaculture, especially stream farming, are actually deforesting the mangrove. Reason is they need to be close to the sea to get the water. So there's a competition for the space. As a result, they sacrifice the trees and for the stream. And that is not what we intend to do. So we would like to have these integrations of the aquaculture within the mangrove restoration. And the aquaculture become very important factors here because they give the community, or the investor, or the company, the cash flow. That's initial return on their investment. So the whole thing is the whole core mechanism is we don't just look at one species. We have multiple species. Strategically, we have mud crab. The reason we know mud crab is very high price in Singapore, especially talk about chili crab, right? It's very, very expensive. And we very hard to get big crabs anymore because we overharvest this species. Together with crab, we have shrimp. And amazingly, these two species, they don't compete. Even though both are crawler at the bottom, but they don't fight. Now, the fish will be occupied the upper space of the water. Yeah. So we all know we fight with the light kinds, different kinds, we leave them alone. So fish will occupy the upper parts. Now, why we have the clam? The clam is actually food for the crabs. And clam shells is actually carbon sequester. That's very important, to sequester carbon. So we're combining these two together at the mangrove area. Yeah? And of course, the mangrove will provide us the filtration of the water, so we don't really have to invest or put a lot of money and energy in keeping the water clean and it's stabilizing coastline, which is the whole intentions of restoring the mangrove. And of course, it creates the nursery environment for the aquatic life. Now for the food, plenty of food out there. So which means the feeding to the animals is minimal. Because in aquaculture, we know 50 to 60% of the cost is actually into the feed. So having this natural environment that we actually reduce the feed cost and water cost. And of course, we don't use a lot of chemicals because the natural capital is actually protecting our investments. Yeah? And the financial role of aquaculture becomes so critical because it gives the farmer or the investor the cash flow that they can able to continue the restoration and management of the mangrove. So this is how the system is implemented. Nothing new. We have seen this in Indonesia as well. That is basically, we don't chop down the mangrove. We just create the ditch around the mangrove. Yeah? So the ditch provides the water space, and during the high tide, the water will come up, will submerge the whole thing, and then the crabs and the rest will have all 100% of the space. Then when low tide, the stream will retreat, the fish will retreat to the ditch, but the crab will be on the mangrove area as well. So which means this is 70-30% split on the mangrove area versus the pond area or water area for the fish and the stream. So this system is created and is doing well because it achieved the whole intentions of what we're trying to do. Now we know the ecosystem services from the mangrove is very powerful. Yeah? If you look at this whole thing here, that it actually provides 33,000 to 57,000 USD per year per hectare. That is just from the eco-service system. But if you look at this chart, it doesn't include aquaculture. It has only fishery. right? So aquaculture is not captured in the value. So when we plug in our aquaculture value, and you can see the numbers change. Now, by all means, the micro crab here, $30,000 USD per year is very conservative because the design of the farm we have here, we can produce actually 2 tons of the mud crab per hectare per year. So if you look at the market price of, let's say, $30 per kg, because there's a 600 gram crabs, the $30 is about the market price. So we can achieve actually much more than 30,000 USD per hectare per year. So the seafood become very, very important in these mangrove restorations, yeah, because it's a cash flow and multiple revenue. So besides aquaculture, we have the so-called the standard ecosystem coming from the mangrove, that is fuel, timber, ecotourism, trainings, and education. By the way, the mangrove that we have is actually very good. We call local name called bakau. So it's actually water resistant. You can plug into the water, it will not rot. So at the jetty, you can see all those wood sticking up. They're actually coming from mangrove. Yeah. So this feedback mechanism allowed the local adoptions. So the community would like to have it. So they would like to be part of it to so-called they can have a livelihood and to able to help us maintain, sustain the mangrove, because that is their interest, to give the mangrove healthy. So then, of course, later on, where more will come from the conservation. Now, this is the core of the whole thing. When we look at the whole process, so which is the core? The core technology is actually the hatchery. That is the most difficult part, because you need to have crablets to seed the forest. So this crab hatchery technology is actually developed at the Aquaculture Innovation Center at Temasek Poly in Singapore. That is my daytime job. So we actually developed the whole thing, and then we license out to the company, and the company will be the one that do the hatchery. That is the core of the whole thing. Yeah. And then we actually do the POC over at Brunei. Now, if you look at the challenges, there are a lot. Yeah, a lot of challenges, nothing new, but it requires the understanding of the system. So basically, you need to know the larvae, why they die, what are the diseases, how you're going to solve the problem, nutrition requirement, especially at the early stage, which require the live feed. And if you look at broodstock management and spawning, a lot of science behind that. Fortunately, we've got a Bible. In 2023, we worked with the FAO. We put the world expert to Singapore. We locked them up for 1 week. They have to finish the book before I let them go. So after we put the whole thing together, and this book was published last year, and we have 3 copies here, which I will give to the fellow panelists. The reason is it's too heavy, it's 2 kg, so we cannot bring too many. But you can go to FAO website and download the PDF files. Okay? So there are also other technical challenges like the water quality, environmental control, and weaning and standardization. That is also very critical. So it's a complex technical challenges for this particular thing. Now just to look at this diagram here is comparison with the so-called current farming method using box. Yeah. So the box of the crabs versus our so-called free range out at the mangrove, and you see the performance from spawning time, spawning percentage, fertilization, hatching, fertility, survival, okay? It's all very, very good compared to the so-called the box farm crabs. And there are other factors. So basically, all the science coming from the left side of your screen, there's mangrove density and culture. We need to understand how many trees we need to have to balance off the nutrients discharge, the crab behavior, their life cycle, because they are very, very different at every stage of growth. The tidal regime is very important because using the high tide to change the water. Yeah. And also the settlement characteristic, different location, different mud. By the way, the mud is wonderful. It's a natural hospital for animals. So when this animal gets sick, they bury under the mud, they heal very rapidly. So you don't see that in the box farm. Yeah? So only in mangrove farming, you can see very little disease, and the recovery of the crab from the so-called amputations, they're able to molt very fast and they grow faster as well. The water quality, that's been critical, and also microbiome, both soil, water, and within the cracks. Now, the whole purpose we want to do is to achieve the maximum carrying capacity. So at this moment, these are the issues we face with how you make sure they reach the food. If you don't distribute the food properly, they need to walk to search for the food so they don't get too fat. Yeah. So the distribution of food so that minimize the walking is very important. Predation is crazy because they are monkey, there are all kinds of things trying to eat your crabs. So that one you have to make sure that is control and competition among themselves. That's why you must have enough place for them to hide and not to attack each other. And of course, the habitat availability. That is how you structure the mangrove tree in such a way that is a place for them to hide. It's not for them to reduce the habitat space. So a lot of mathematics, biology, chemistry, and physics. That is, it goes back to fundamental science. It's all fundamentals, yeah? So we bring the fundamental science into the application and let the students see whatever you learn in your university year is actually applicable to solving the issue we face, in this case, the mud crab. So what we have here, we started the pilot plant in Brunei, thanks to our colleagues from Zaiem, somewhere sitting, okay? So very kind of Brunei sites that allow us to do it using the mangrove, and the area they gave to us is actually here, Manokara region, right? And this is the area here, and you can see this is actually the mangrove resort paradise. So they actually have hotel there, you know, for the tourists to look at the mangrove, and this is the whole area for us to work on it. And when we look at this whole thing, of course, it gives us the real world with the viability. The environment is good because we know that in Southeast Asia, not all countries have very good weather. Luckily, Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, we are well protected. We don't have typhoon, okay? And we hope this is a blueprint for replications. So if you look at Brunei, the total area for mangrove is 18,000. They only allow 1% of the mangrove area for aquaculture. But if we can prove that this method works, so most probably the chances of using all this for aquaculture is possible because we are doing restoration and conservations for the country. Now, if you look at this whole thing, the whole Borneo state is the world's third largest island. So it's a beautiful place where these are plentiful of the mangrove for us to actually start to create wealth for the host country and also for Singapore as an off-taker. So this is a closer look on the areas, and this part is the farm here, which we don't like because they chop off the mangrove already, so we won't touch this part. We reserve this, and this is how it looks like. Okay, so basically it fits into this COP30's mandate. Is very good, that climate adaptation, restorations, income and food. That's why we're looking at food security, because this is just the beginning. We can grow other aquatic animals as well. So we're using mud crab because of the high market price for that species. And sustainability, because it's a natural capital, we are using it, so we don't rely on external feed that much, okay? And also the chemicals, and of course, food security, not just for Singapore, but for Brunei as well in this particular case. So for Singapore, what is our position? We basically is a hub, okay? As we discussed in the previous sessions, that R&D and technology hubs. So we do access to a lot of good technology, and we have the means of translating it. We just need the space and the opportunity to translate. And logistics hub is very important because we do know in farming, the farmer say, yes, I can grow the food, but who's going to buy from me? So supply and demand is always a challenge. The one who wants to buy cannot buy. Those one who grow the food want to sell, there is no market for them. So Singapore will be an off-taker because we can off-take due to the proximity of Brunei to Singapore, and then the world is our market. Of course, financial hub where the funding to support projects like this, I don't think should be too difficult. So this is to close up in Brunei. Go back to the original diagram here is who are the academic cluster, provide us the technology, AIC, and then Brunei University, right? And by the way, the Brunei University will set up another AIC called Brunei AIC to support what AIC is supporting Singapore company at this moment in Singapore, but they will support the local company, which when we bring Singapore company to Brunei to do farming, they will support our company as well. So there's a whole ecosystem, we are supporting it. Now, for the industry, of course, we must have private sector, and we expect to expand more company coming in to take the technologies and move forward. Of course, the key contact in Brunei is BEDB. Then investor, at this moment, we have two major investors on the sideline, and they are investing in the project. Okay, so with that, we think IMA is a good model at this stage that is actually bankable, replicable, okay? And then we would like to basically see how can it support job creations, economic developments, and also the climate actions, that this could be a good remedies towards that. Now with that, thank you for your attention, and we hope you can contact us and we can basically translate the technology or transfer technologies to your needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for the insightful sharing. Next up, we'll move on to the panel discussion on how regional collaboration can spur technology adoption and address the impacts of climate change on food production. Please give us a moment as we prepare the stage for the panel program.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Enough already, right? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Before we start with introductions, just want to say a big thank you to Chee for the extensive and comprehensive presentation. I think I definitely learned a lot about the intricacies of mangrove aquaculture, as well as the science-backed data that you provided in terms of the benefits of free-ranging crabs versus box farm crabs. But to build on that foundation that you've set, we've got together a great panel today. We spoke about integration, and this is a panel of diverse perspectives from different parts. So we have representatives from our panelists from the private sector, from the government, as well as from academia. But I'll let the panelists introduce themselves, and before I do that, a quick introduction. So I am Rueban. I lead the Carbon Finance and Markets Taskforce in WWF. And as part of my role, I work to bring carbon finance to communities, as well as to biodiversity, to ensure that positive impacts are transferred and are channeled to people, nature, and the climate. But before that, I'll hand over to the panelists, and maybe we can start with Laurence, a quick introduction of you and your organization and what you do in this space. Over to you, Laurence.
Thank you very much, Ruben. And so, introduction, I'm Laurence Jassogne. I'm the head of nature and climate solutions in a company called Olam Agri. So Olam Agri is a global commodity trader, agricultural commodity trader. And the purpose of our company is to transform food, feed, and fiber for a more sustainable future. So why is this purpose so important to us and is, integral part of our business model? Is because, also based on the presentation that we had as well, so climate change is affecting farmers throughout our supply chains, right? I'll give you some examples, and it's in big ag and in small ag. So in big ag, for example, in Australia, something that concretely happens is that farmers are saying to us, well, look, now we can't even know when the rains are going to stop, our cotton farmers. And the problem is that it can't rain when they're harvesting the cotton, because otherwise the cotton bolls get affected and the quality decreases. We have farmers, smallholder rice farmers in Southeast Asia, and the problem is that they've registered to an irrigation scheme, but then when they need the irrigation to grow their rice, they don't have access to rice because of drought. We have like cotton farmers in West Africa, in Togo, for example. They want to plant, their cotton, and they say they can't even plan anymore when to plant the cotton because they don't know when the rain starts. The rain seems to start, they want to plant, then they stop for another 3 weeks before they start again. And then, you know, just last week I was talking to a farmer in Brazil who said to us, like, weather is the biggest problem for us now and in the future, we think, because the rains are starting so late that we have to plant our wheat so late, which means that we have to harvest earlier and the grains are not mature. So throughout our supply chains, you know, we feel that farmers are actually feeling the effect of climate change. So what do we do as a company? So we have what we call a climate transition plan. So often a climate transition plan is discussed from the point of view of decarbonization. So for us as a company, adaptation is crucial to also work with farmers around, you know, climate change. Because in the end, adaptation is what is required to make our farmers in our supply chains more resilient, right? What is resilience? You know, the definition of resilience is, you know, the ability for a farmer to be able to recover or withstand a climate stress or shock. And so what we want to do is we want to collaborate. We want to help farmers access innovations, access solutions, so that they can really adopt climate-smart agriculture or, you know, region agricultural solutions so that they can improve their resilience. Because in the end, that is the only way that we can make sure that the farmers are actually having, you know, a fair livelihood. And at the same time, it's also going to help, you know, decrease the chances or the risks, you know, to disrupt supply chains.
Zaiem, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ruben. So my name is Zaiem. I'm the director of the Brunei Climate Change Office. Thank you very much for having me here. It's good to be back at the Singapore Pavilion for the second year in a row, at the genuinely pretty, as per the Guardian, pavilion. So my team and I, we lead climate change efforts in Brunei, so developing policies, strategies, both on the mitigation, adaptation front, but also in trying to secure the means of implementation. And that means being involved in negotiations at the climate front, trade front, even establishing MOUs, and we have a long-standing history of working with Singapore. Just to add very briefly to what Dr. Laurence also just said, adaptation is also very key for us because, to put it into context, our emissions are very low. 14 million tons, so threefold less than Singapore's. So even if we doubled it, which I won't ask us to do, we still won't be the second lowest emitter in the region. And we have rainforest cover of 72%. And as Dr. Lee also just mentioned, we have vast potential in the mangrove space. So the reality is we need to protect the livelihoods and the well-being of people who live there. In the region itself, there's around 450 million people who live within 100 kilometers of the coastline. And it's this coastline that also helps provide revenue sources and looking after families and livelihoods. Dr. Laurence mentioned about farmers. So I won't talk more about wheat, etc., but I'll talk about something close to a lot of Asians or Southeast Asians' hearts, durians. So the reality is, even durian yield is very unpredictable. You know, we termed it informally the durian paradox. Normally, you'll know when you'll be able to harvest some. Now, not really, whether you're growing it domestically or importing it from your neighboring partners. And that's why resilience and adaptation is absolutely key. It's the same for us. When it comes to a small country like Brunei, we can't put too much of our effort only on one thing. So it can't be mitigation and mitigation alone. It has to be co-benefits of mitigation, complemented by adaptation, but also economic growth. As such, I was very interested by the presentation by Dr. Chee talking about the potential of mangroves here, right? My team, my son, they joke that I go to Singapore too often, right? Partly for work, partly to see friends, but partly for chili crabs. So it's good to know that there is a potential to have some in Brunei, so to have more chili crabs in Brunei without, you know, compromising my travels to Singapore, but also to see it as an economic revenue engine for G2G, company to company, business to business opportunity to really see how we can scale this up, as you rightly said. POC it in Brunei and then demonstrate scalability beyond then. And Brunei provides that wonderful opportunity.
Thanks, Zaiem. And we'll definitely, as a Singaporean, I feel like I can say you're definitely welcome to Singapore anytime, and please have our crabs and more of it, please. Over to you, Dr. Lee, to elaborate more on IAAS.
Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much about my role in IAAS. What I'm going to share is I'm really fortunate that I'm able to have different platforms at different stages of my life to do something that I really love too. So I'm still with NUS. never leave somehow. I don't change partners. And then with Temasek Poly and we were school directors. Then the whole poly system in Singapore is to support the industry. How we translate technology to the industry. So when we look into food security way back more than 10 years ago, and we decided that aquaculture could be the best bet for protein because compared to land animals, cold-blooded animals, aquatic animals is more efficient. Yeah. Because they don't need to burn energy to keep body temperature and they don't need to spend energy to stand on the feet. So the water is actually provide that support. So the energy is actually go to the growth. That's why we discovered that it's very good species. But the challenge is you're dealing with water. We are not familiar with. Even though we talk about drinking water, yeah, that is for human consumption. If you use that kind of energy input for fish, sorry man, you go bankrupt. There's no way you can survive. So as a result, how much to compromise become a challenge. So, and along the way, of course, IAAS came along, step the platform for us to say, look, okay, now there's a platform that we can rapidly look into technology and turn that into impact. Because under public service is still some restrictions because a lot of approval process needed before you make a move. But in under IAAS, because it's fully private funded, that is a non-profit organizations and there's no conflict of interest. And it's easier for us to look at technology and say, this is good, let's translate, find investor, invest and move. So that's why the founder, Dr. Fu, is sitting there. Thanks to him for founding this wonderful association. And that's where I am today on behalf of IAAS to involve in COP, but my day job is still with the university and Temasek Poly. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. And to just pick up on your last point, you spoke about the flexibility that, being part of the private sector, the non-profit sector can give you, as opposed to being part of a public institution in the public sector. But maybe, and how we'll do this is we'll start with our first round of questions to the panelists, but I'm also keen to hear from the audience. So we'll hopefully have some time to take questions from the audience. So please think through them and hopefully we have 10 minutes or so for questions. But just to build on the point of private versus public sector, or to build on the flexibility that the private sector has, the public sector also has a key role in setting a strong environment, a regulatory environment that can unlock some of the innovation that Dr. Lee has shared about. And Brunei has really been a leader in ASEAN in this front, in terms of being a place where innovators can test bed new solutions that can be scaled in the region. So Zaiem, if you could unpack further of the thinking behind and the policy considerations and the vision for Brunei when it comes to innovation and food resilience.
Thank you very much for that, Rueban. And it's a very good way to set the scene because the reality is, and we talk about this for ASEAN as a start, we're quite small, actually with a 6th largest economy, 3rd largest population if you see us as a block, but it's still a developing economy. And the reality is, the differences, the size, those are the comparative advantages. And the only way to really maximize it is by working together. So if you apply a lens and focus just between Brunei and Singapore, we're very close. 2 hours by flight, maybe less than that with some tailwind. And the reality is a lot of companies and businesses want to work with each other. And as you rightly said, private sector, they take on the cues and the signals that the public service gives, so policymakers. And most of the time, there happens to be some loggerheads. Private sector will say, you're not moving fast enough to the public sector. Public sector says, hey, bypass my own process because you can. But the beauty is if you're able to work together. And I think if I not just look at Brunei, but I look at it as a Brunei-Singapore cooperation, there are a few things that we can do. I think first of all is to build some safety nets or create policies that enable these safety nets in which we can encourage innovation, risk-taking within some guardrails, such that it actually encourages businesses to come in, partners to actually work with each other. A different example, funny enough, last year was the 40th official marking the relationship between Brunei and Singapore. And 2 cafes actually worked together to come up with a special edition coffee that they came up with, one in Singapore, one in Brunei. And that didn't require policy interventions or government to say anything. You see the strong relationships. So they take on cue that it's a very strong relationship between Brunei and Singapore. But the reality is, imagine if the two governments did come together to come up with policies. So that's why I feel that if you have a regional safety net that's able to harmonize processes, harmonize standards, with a bit of flexibility, of course, I think that will really help you scale this up very quickly. I think Professor Chee will also be able to share how we can actually scale that up faster. In the presentation, I think I can't take credit for the 1% of acreage being apportioned for aquaculture, but I might be able to take credit if I'm able to convince my higher-ups to give a much larger acreage. But it's in doing so, we have to make sure that it's de-risked in terms of the investor, in terms of the people working in that space. And we don't do it just simply government to government, but it's usually at the working level, senior officials level, even at the ministers level. So we have MOUs, and recently at the Singapore International Agriculture Week, our Ministry of Finance and MSC actually talked about developing a joint study to establish a joint, I need to find the right term for it, but I think it's a joint zone for trade. Sorry? Joint agri-food zone, so thank you very much. So see the Singapore-Brunei collaboration there. And that's where I think it plays a massive opportunity. Secondly, I think we talk about size. So Singapore, very population dense because of size, and everyone wants to come to Singapore, which means every inch of real estate is very important. So you might not put it for aquaculture, but that's where Brunei can come and help, right? Small population, much larger area. And in fact, we did a study on our blue carbon where we've been able to sequester a lot of carbon. So there is the opportunity to do so, and we have areas that are earmarked for it. That is a good recipe for being that test bed for scaling. So Brunei can be the starting point, but that means the region in other parts of Borneo and other parts of ASEAN can also do the same. And the third part is on mangrove ecosystems. I think we definitely need to see this triple threat or triple opportunity that mangrove can offer: food, nature, and climate. So in terms of, if I'm looking at it from a Brunei lens, of course, we also want to look into carbon markets or seeing how carbon markets can play a role. At the moment, our emissions are still quite low. If I'm leaning on nature-based credits from my rainforest, there's a challenge on additionality. But there is a big opportunity when it comes to mangroves. It has 5 times the sequestration potential and much more opportunity. So I think if we look at it from that space, while it also helps to create the ecosystem for mud crabs to thrive, coastal resilience, these are things that we can look into that tackles mitigation, adaptation, and economic growth. So I come from right now, I'm from the public sector, although in a previous life, I'm from the private sector. So I have to bring the policy angle in. There's 3 steps I would look into. Number 1 is that common standards. So harmonization shouldn't be seen as something rigid or something structural, but more as a human-to-human interaction, how easily we can speak the same language. Brunei and Singapore already shares a currency peg agreement, so it makes it so much easier to, again, build it from there. Secondly is building the common infrastructure. So Singapore very much is advanced on the academic side, on the investment side, and Brunei, we offer the real estate or the landmass side. So we should be able to de-risk each other's investments and efforts by making sure that we develop common infrastructure that helps make it much easier. Even supply chain movements, we have to make it much easier between 2 countries. And finally, I would say it's developing common incentives. Between Brunei and Singapore, I think agriculture isn't really the biggest because we are both net importers for food resources, but that doesn't take it away from the importance that small-scale farmers and medium-scale farmers can play. So we have to create common incentives. Normally, when it comes to policies, we have the stick and carrot approach. I think in this case, there needs to be more carrots, that we need to put it out there and help them when it comes to economic growth, resilience definitely in the face of changing climate. So one thing I want to make sure that I leave the crowd with is, we know that climate change is this cross-border externality, more negative than positive. It does not respect the borders. It does not care that there's a line between Brunei and Malaysia, Indonesia and Borneo, or even to Singapore, which means it requires a cross-border solution. And efforts like these are the ones that will really help us. And of course, you can look at it more from a human level, from a well-being perspective, or if you're from more capitalistic, from an economic growth engine. Either way, it will really help the region thrive. And of course, between 2 countries, we can be that pilot for success that can then be scaled up. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Zaiem. That's a lot to unpack, and we'll revisit some of this. Some of the key themes that you highlighted: the role of government to de-risk, the role of government to set cues for the private sector to follow, but also the role of government to unlock new markets, like the carbon markets, to leverage on opportunities and natural capital that some countries are more endowed with than others. But hold that thought, we'll come back to carbon markets in a bit. But before that, moving over to Dr. Laurence, Olam Agri is regarded as one of the leaders of sustainability and building resilient supply chains. And given Olam Agri's global footprint, as well as regional footprint, appreciate if you could share some case studies and stories of how Olam Agri has gone about building innovation and food resilience across the ecosystems that you work in.
Thank you, Ruben. And so I'll give two examples, if that's okay. So the first example is an example from Southeast Asia. And it's an example that's spoken a lot about, which is in a solution in the rice system. So I don't know who in the audience knows or has ever heard about AWD, alternate wetting and drying. So rice systems are responsible to 11 to 12% of the global methane emissions, so globally. And so one of the solutions that's often proposed, and it's been, proven by science, and it has been existing already for, 15 years and more, is what we call AWD. So instead of, growing rice in water like flooded the whole season, you actually have periods of drainage. And because of that, you create conditions where methane is not produced in the production system. Yeah? And so often this solution in the sector is spoken about from the point of view of a low methane rice solution. So it's a decarbonization solution. But if you speak about it from the point of view of resilience, you could also say it's a low water rice solution, or it is a low cost rice solution. Because, you need more water, so you decrease, the necessity of farmers to access water for irrigation. And, you also reduce costs of farmers related to fuel for water pumps and so on. So from that perspective, it is a decarbonization solution, but it is also very important to improve resilience of farmers, yeah? And so Olam Agri, building on what you were saying, Zaiem, so Olam Agri very much needs, a collaboration and also a clear direction from policymakers. So a beautiful example is, in Thailand, where we were part of public-private partnerships, where, first it was under the NAMA program, where the government said, strong direction, we want to do low-carbon rice, we want to bring AWD, which is a package, it's not only like a recommendation drain your soils, it's also about, land leveling, sorry, that was on me, fertilizer, fertilizer recommendations and all of that. So, there needs to be a push and a will from the government and a direction from the government. And then it's collaborations with, for example, national level research organizations, but also international research organizations like IRI. So they bring the varieties, they bring the agronomic recommendations, they test the solutions, right? And we look and see and learn and say okay, this seems to be a mature solution now that we can test with our farmers. And then through, our network of farmers, we kind of learn, we take those solutions and we test. It's going to work in some areas, it's not going to work in other areas. And then we can see how, also with direction and guidance from governments, we can see okay, as a company, what are those market-based approaches once we have finished, with these public-private partnerships, we have learned together, we've scaled up to a certain point, but, what's the next level? And so that's where a company like Olam Agri can really help in, market-based approaches for scaling, where, carbon, regulations, carbon credits become, a very interesting entry point to say how can we scale further. So this is very much from the point of view of the continuum, and a role that a company like Olam Agri can play, but also how we really need to be aligned with so many other players, in the sector in order to really scale, successfully scale. So this is rice in Thailand. Now I'm going to give you another example. Did you know that 30 to 40% of food that is produced in the world from field to fork is lost, is wasted? So this is an enormous amount of food, and this is also a cause for massive emissions in the food system. Yeah? So Olam Agri has understood in where we are in the supply chain that we can play a role in helping farmers reduce what we call post-harvest losses. Yeah. So by improving and access for farmers to solutions to reduce post-harvest losses, we can increase their income because they have more produce, for example, per hectare of land. We also reduce emissions, right? And we also potentially save land because the farmers don't have to access more land to produce what has been wasted. And so it's very simple solutions sometimes. So in Nigeria, we have assessed our supply chains and we've seen that post-harvest loss is quite big in our rice programs and also in our wheat programs. So what we've done, we're collaborating and testing with farmers. We are also working very closely with local partners because all the solutions that we work with, also going back to your presentation, we need to contextualize and localize the solutions, right? And so what we've seen is from a point of view of post-harvest loss, we help farmers mechanize so that they can really save, and bring back that harvest that they would otherwise lose. Another thing is storage. So a lot of produce is lost through storage because it's too humid, because there's mold. I mean, we're working in tropical systems. So simple solutions like just using humidity cards and hermetic bags, can make such a big difference for those farmers, but also for us, from the point of view of doing sustainable business. And so here again, it's from the point of view of collaboration, right? It is about, okay, how can we bring it to farmers? Which are the local partners that we can work with? But also, what are the market mechanisms to bring it to scale? So that is where, we collaborate with research partners to develop methodologies, also assessment protocols. So we can't do that in isolation. So again, collaboration is key. Learning from research, testing it, and then finding ways to scale is something that we work very closely with all of our partners.
Thank you so much, Dr. Laurence. And coming from a large conservation organization myself, I cannot emphasize enough the point of being more efficient with our agriculture and food systems to reduce the pressure that's being put on our natural ecosystems and to reduce deforestation that's driven through agriculture and through protecting nature that way. But just to share, I was given strict instructions not to make this panel about carbon markets, being a carbon markets practitioner myself. But Zaiem had brought about carbon markets, and then now Dr. Laurence has also brought about carbon markets. So I feel that that restriction is now lifted, and I can get on with it. So Dr. Lee, you shared a little bit about carbon markets during your presentation.
No, hold on first. Before you come back to me, can we ask him a question?
Okay. It must be about carbon markets.
Yes, okay. Because we do know you have a mangrove project.
Yes.
Yeah, and you love blue carbons. Yeah, can you share with the audience? Because I need to know as well.
Sure, happy to do that, but the panel's about you, so I'll come to you. Right. So, and for those that just joined us, so I'm from WWF. As part of our regional strategy, blue carbon, or what we call blue forests, is a key part of the strategy, particularly because the Asia-Pacific region holds about 50% of the world's mangroves, right? Now, in Indonesia alone, and we have people from Indonesia in the crowd, holds about a third of the world's mangroves. So it is a critical natural ecosystem that WWF is looking to protect, but also restore, because Southeast Asia has lost 30% of its mangroves over the last 40 years, for example. And so building on the successes that Dr. Lee shared in Brunei, we are exploring opportunities to work with the government of Brunei as well as with IAAS to replicate the pilot in other areas in the island of Borneo, in Malaysia, and you mentioned some of those pilot sites, but also in Indonesia. So that's something that we're exploring. And it's important that that's done because a fundamental philosophy is not just relying on carbon markets, right? And it's about creating revenue streams and livelihood opportunities for local communities. And I feel that that's not spoken about enough. But that's also a good segue to go back to you, Dr. Lee, which is to share about exactly that. if you could elaborate more, like we understand how mangrove ecosystems, and this traditionally talked about a lot, even at this COP, about how it can be really blue carbon sinks. But beyond that, it can also be an opportunity for livelihoods. It can be an opportunity to create genuine revenue streams. If you could share a bit more about how your pilot and your work integrates those different practices to improve not only carbon storage, but also the livelihoods of local communities.
Yeah, so for the Brunei projects, the POC is basically strictly commercial. Yeah, we get the land from Brunei governments and then we just translate the technologies and make it happen. But we do know there's a seed in my last slide community, because we do know a lot of community needed a job, especially, for example, once we launched the project in Brunei, our colleague in Sarawak said, look, we have a lot of people in the forest need jobs, right? How can this community benefit from it? So we must come up something for them to make it bankable. So based on our calculation and contextualized to Sarawak environments, which the criteria they pose to us is they would like to have $15,000 ringgit in Malaysian dollars per month per household. Can we help them achieve that target? 15,000 ringgit, that's about 5,000 sings, something like that, yeah, or 4,000 plus USD per household, right? And that is per month. And based on that, it's doable because we calculated it's okay. We can achieve that. And also for the investor, the ROI is basically collect the money and then before they share the dividends. So this is something that we think is bankable, yeah, because once a community comes in and they lower the cost for the farm because the land belongs to them. So you don't have to pay for the land and you don't have to pay for the labor because they are the one who works on it. And we put in the incentive scheme that if they can produce more, we share with them, right? So basically, there's incentive for them to work hard on it. And the data I showed just now is based on the moderate density. So basically, there's an upside of 2 to 3-fold, much more that they can make. So at this moment, our calculation based on what they provide, we basically offer them 2,000 tons of mud crab per hectare per year. Okay, so that is just based on mud crab, and of course we have the mangroves, snappers, then we have the shrimp. That is another part. And we haven't captured the value from carbon credits. That is long term, we consider. But the wood is very high valued. Okay, so we create a whole community, get them to work. And that's what the government wants, right? Because job creations, wealth creations for community, and it make the society more stable. So we find that this project is beyond just a bankable project for investor, but also for the country, for the community. It's powerful enough. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. And I note that we've got slightly over 5 minutes or so, so I'll open the door, the floor for questions. But just to unpack what you said and to share my perspective on that as well. And I really appreciate the community first element that you've taken through the pilot. I mean, it's the incorporating communities at the heart of any initiative tends to bring about long-term, more sustainable benefits, and we've seen that early successes in the pilot you have, and hopefully with the guidance of Brunei and other ASEAN countries like Singapore, we can see that replicated across the region with the support of other governments as well. With that, I'll open the floor. We've had a lively discussion, a very insightful presentation, and we've had also a very esteemed audience here. So I'm happy to take questions on anything that's shared or anything about mud crabs, blue carbon, collaboration, or food innovation. We've covered a whole host of topics here. Any questions from the floor? Yes.
So I'm Yasmin from Brazil, and I'd like to congratulate you all to your talk right now. It was really interesting. I would like to know if, considering that in the Brazilian Amazon, that's where I'm from, there is also mangroves. And there's an influence of the erosion in these mangroves. And there is a high pressure on the tourist market and the housing market in these mangroves, causing it to deforestation and even higher erosion and other environmental problems, and even food shortage. And in this sense, I would like to ask, especially Dr. Lee, but any of you have lots to contribute as well, if it is possible to launch an aquaculture project, similar aquaculture project in Brazil, and especially in the Brazilian Amazon, that we have this particular erosion problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. And before Dr. Lee, you come in, I just want to also not let Zaiem off the hook, because you also mentioned the heart of the problem, which is trade-offs and policy trade-offs, and how land can be allocated for different reasons, and that's a key part of a policymaker's job. So after Dr. Lee, Zaiem, please.
Yeah, that's very important. You have to settle that trade-off first, right? And then once that is settled, we can come in to support. Just to share with you, we came to Berlin. The first 2 days we visited the farmers market, look at the fish. Oh my goodness, huge, a lot of fishes. The biodiversity is beautiful. All right, so you look at the
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm from Berlin.
So that's never the issue, because you have the resources, you have the environments to do it, but you have to settle the policy side. That part you have to settle. Which one is for farming, which one is for the tourism development, which one is for housing. That one government has to settle. And then those protected area, okay, that one's for aquaculture. Before that, the mangrove truly protected, not for anything. And now it's getting smaller because nobody go and preserve and restore it. Now, if the aquaculture can coexist with mangrove, then there's an incentive for them to protect it, to plant more, right? Because that's their livelihood. So that is the one we try to drive. That don't see these two as competing, they actually can be together. And with aquaculture coming in, provide the cash flow, okay, then the community will support, will protect it. Yeah, because the more trees they have, the healthier animals they will get.
Thank you.
I'll add on as well. So thank you, Ruben, for bringing back in. It's important to talk about trade-offs. And I think Dr. Chee mentioned about community first. So even in, for example, government targets or government aims, it's always, people should always be at the heart of it, you know, because, for example, if an area was apportioned for tourism, for development, there's probably someone affected by that. So how do you weigh out the trade-offs? It might mean through making sure, and I heard about Malaysia's example, that every month the household gets around $4,000. So how do you make sure that you can also recycle the revenue to help marginalized communities, not just in terms of giving them money, but also in generating jobs? So if it's tourism, what kind of jobs can be generated from tourism? If it's carbon markets, how do you compensate the area that's been taken away? Earlier I mentioned about incentives. So we need to provide a lot of good incentives, a lot of early compromises as well for small-scale farmers and people who call that area home. I'm not too sure what the exact figure is for the Amazon and in Brazil, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people still call the area home. So we have to make sure that before any initiatives or activities are taken, consultation happens. And Singapore is actually a master of public consultations. I can't emphasize the importance of that because it's good to hear from the community about what that means. In Brunei, by the way, when it comes to food systems and agriculture, they actually share the same ministry with our tourism ministry. So when we talk about mangroves, we not only see it from a commercial angle, although that is the main priority, but the other value driver is how can you actually cultivate a system where we can also attract ecotourism to Brunei. So I think that's also the massive opportunity that this region, Belém, Amazon can call home. And I also concur, the peixe with acai, the fish is magnificent. It's big.
Now I know why they put our farms next to the mangrove parasite resort.
Win-win.
Thanks. And before I open for the next question, I just want to say to Yasmin, like, you should be really proud of the city of Belém. They've done a great job to host this COP. So well done to you and
Thank
the
you.
city. Yeah, thanks. Maybe I'll open the floor again. Any further questions? Anything? Okay. Because I'm also getting signs from the AV that I'm running out of time. So before I let you go, the panelists, a quick word on making full circle and coming back to what the heart of this panel is about. It's about how we can increase food resilience and break the boundaries of mitigation, adaptation, livelihoods, and carbon storage, but really see them as holistic elements. So with that context, maybe I'll start with you, Dr. Lee. Any last words on the panel that you would like the audience to take away?
A lot of words, so I don't think I can sum it up in one word. But what I'm going to say is our partnership with Brunei is superb. It's very flat, the administration. So every time we go, we have the opportunity to meet minister if we want to. Likewise in Singapore. So that is the key. Yeah. So it's not too bureaucratic that you need to book way in advance. Basically, they are open for discussion, and any issue we have, they solve it and they help us. So that is, I think, the experience that we had, and we really enjoyed it and appreciate your side for helping us out.
Zaiem?
Thank you so much for that, and hopefully we can maintain that and actually expand that as well. Without sounding too cheesy, I think we should move from hardware to hardware. So I think to Yasmin's question around people, so I think whatever we do, it has to be people-centered, right? We talk about carbon, climate, but community is very important. So before we embark on that, I think it's important to have that conversation with people. Systems are very good, but it's humans and people who run those systems. That's why I think the hardware part is going to be very important, and I think, probably something that a lot of us share.
And exactly that. So, and that is the fundamental philosophy that we have in WWF and Panda. So Zaiem, if you anytime want to join in WWF, you're welcome to do so. Dr. Laurence.
So from my perspective, being on this panel, what I see is that, our examples are probably very different, from the examples that you were describing. But fundamentally, I think we need to keep on being curious and really, look beyond, the technical content to see how did it actually work. There's a lot to learn from examples out there that are maybe far away from your own field. But there are these soft, I would say, characteristics of, a case or a model that you can learn from and that you can also try to apply in your own field. And those are as important as, what you see and what you would compare it with normally.
Thank you, Dr. Laurence. Beautiful words. And with that, we've come to the end of the panel. And a big round of applause to the panelists.
Thank you to our distinguished panelists for sharing your valuable perspectives. May I invite everyone to stay on stage to receive a token of appreciation. What you will receive is a set of Singapore Farm Forces keychain, representing Singapore's 3 local produce, namely vegetables, fish, and eggs. Thank you all for your time and participation. We invite you to continue the conversation after this session. Have a wonderful afternoon ahead.